one place to start today with the news that Manchester City were crowned champions last night. That even kicking a ball thanks to Arsenal's 1-0 defeat to Nottingham Forest, which in turn kept Steve Cooper's side in the Premier League. Mikel Arteta described it as a very sad day. So look, Melissa, it is their third successive title, fifth in six, still on for the treble, of course. Manchester City, Jamie Carragher described them on a different level. Are they?
They are. It's not just that Manchester City win titles. The ruthlessness and relentlessness to which they do it. They marmalize the opponents they're facing, and then also those that they come up against in a title race. I've seen this before, covering those close tilts with Liverpool, and having covered those, watching Arsenal this season and spending time at the club, I could see the signs of the psychological turmoil, that the need to be near perfect, to be spot on in every aspect and to not let a single thing slip is so taxing. And I was at the Emirates last weekend when they faced Brighton, and I can tell you, before kickoff there was such a deflation in that stadium knowing the City score that you could feel it in the atmosphere. And I think Arsenal, when there was no expectation and they were setting the pace and people were waiting for them to make a mistake, that was a more comfortable position than having City come at you. Once City started coming at them, there was just nothing they could do. And the pressure started to tell, as it does when you're facing a machine, a monster. Like I said, Manchester City don't just win. It's the manner in which they do it. They crush those that are right in front of them and those that they are tussling with.
Yeah, and we saw what it meant to them yesterday. I mean, it's ironic. I was at the Etihad at the weekend on Friday, and there was a lot of talk about the fact they wouldn't even watch. I mean, this is what it meant to the Manchester City players. It's a wonderful moment for them. I mean, but it's a ridiculous thing that they're doing. 3-3 now.
It is ridiculous, but also they've earned it. They've worked hardest, they've been the most consistent, they've got the most experience. You use the word monsters, and one of the Italian papers, the day after City's demolition of Real Madrid, used exactly that word to describe a City monster, scary City. And we on Sky Sports News, on Sky Sports rather, yesterday, when Kelly was presenting, she showed a film of the story of the season. And in that film, it gave you an insight into why they're champions. Not just the team talks from Guardiola, but also the team talks from Gundogan, from Diaz, from individual players, all dripping with determination and insight and talking to the very thing that shows like ours, the newspapers, whatever else were saying. They don't want it. Their eyes are on the Champions League. They're past it now. And recognising all of the criticisms that had been aimed at City and saying, let's show them that we do want it, that we are hungry, that we do still have that desire. That's why they're winners. Everyone talks about maybe being disparaging about Arsenal. Arsenal have been fantastic this season. But I think as far as City are concerned, the focus, the intensity, to small details as well, that's what's got them in front and that's what's got them over the line.
It's what they do. This is what they know. And when they were stumbling, that was actually atypical of them. And then you saw Pep Guardiola address it quite publicly, trying to rouse the players, which has worked. But you speak about details and standards. There was a very good clip of Kyle Walker and Jack Grealish being interviewed. And of course, Grealish has been phenomenal. He's been such a smart player for City in the way he's able to hold on to the ball, offer Pep Guardiola control when he's also got disruptors like Phil Foden and Haaland. And we've all been praising Grealish. And so they ask Kyle, how brilliant has he been? And Grealish steps in and says, actually, he's one of my fiercest critics. He's always on my case about where I need to improve.
It filters down, doesn't it, I think, from Pep. That's the mentality of this team.
They all hold each other to account and to the highest standards. And I thought that exchange was so fascinating because you had Walker saying, yes, as amazing as he's been, he can get more goals. He needs to dribble less. He needs to facilitate for the team more. And I thought that was quite a cool window into the mechanics of the mentality there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually chatting, there was a lot of discussion that went on Friday, but I was chatting to the cameraman, and he was saying we chatted to Phil Foden about how Pep, what's he like as a manager? Does he let the reins up ever? No, was the short answer, basically. It's just relentless from Pep, but that's what you get.
And you know what? On top of that, everyone says, oh, well, City, the money. And let's not kid ourselves, money helps, right? But if you look at that side, Kyle Walker was a Spurs player. Spurs didn't want him. Spurs allowed him to leave when he was at the football club. If you look at, say, Grealish, Spurs could have signed him, but basically didn't want to pay the extra money that it would have cost to take him. Look at Julian Alvarez. He was easily gettable. South American Player of the Year is around about £14 million. But so many clubs don't do the work outside of scouting within a very small pool. City go and find him. Mario Kanji offered to many clubs in the Premier League before he went to City. They could easily have taken him. They didn't. He goes there. He improves out of all recognition. Looks as though he's been playing there for the last 5 years. There's a massive misconception that it's just all about the money. The money helps. Let's not kid ourselves. It certainly does. But I think as far as the ability to improve players, to get that consistency, to mould them into a unit, they deserve every credit and more.
What does it do to Pep's legacy? Because plenty was spoken about that. And I quite liked the fact, although a lot of people will probably say, oh, well, he shouldn't have said that in his press conferences. No matter whether I get anything, really, my legacy stands before it's, I think he backs himself quite rightly. This is a man that's just come in and changed everything, really, it feels.
Yeah. The thing with Pep Guardiola is he doesn't just win football matches and win leagues. It's the style that he influences. And I spoke to Roberto De Zerbi recently, and he was talking about tactical tweaks that he's made to his own teams based off Guardiola's Barcelona and now Manchester City. We saw Pep advocate for the false nine. We saw him do this hybrid fullback role. There's so many things that he offers to the game that people pick up on and try to implement in their own various manners. So he's not just somebody who dominates in the sense of results. He's somebody who impacts football in a much greater way. To Darren's point, I think it's unequivocal that City's resources are bottomless in a financial sense, but also in how they're structured and how well they operate. But that all comes from a level of, being state-powered, and I think we also need to recognise that this is a team that the Premier League held 100+ charges up against in February. So there's all that to...
Charges which they vehemently deny.
Yeah, they deny that. And so that's all one aspect of it, but it can be separated from the fact that Guardiola is a footballing genius. And what we've seen, some of the interplay from City and how he's able to find a way to still gain that midfield control when he's got Erling Haaland and he doesn't have that false nine anymore. To then think, okay, John Stones can come in and give us that numerical superiority that we seek there. He is a genius. And I spoke to Mikel Arteta on Friday, and I said to him, you more than anyone will know what Arsenal were facing because you were at City. You know behind the scenes how they operate. You know what they're capable of. You know about the standards. And he said, listen, I can't say much because I was there, and it's not wise of me to say much, but he's like, I'm proud of my players because I know the level that they're at. And I think that tells a story.
Yeah, he admitted, didn't he, yesterday that they are, not at the same level of them. What have the papers said? Plenty in the papers about City, I would think.
Some fantastic stuff written in the papers across all of the papers this morning. I can't show you all of them, but I will show you just 3 pieces. This is great by Jonathan Northcroft in the Sunday Times. Goes into a very deep dive of the mystique and the hype, which is utterly justified around Pep Guardiola from his arrival at the club, from the unassuming way that he took control from the maxims that he has in his office. The level of detail in this is just outstanding. He says he's got written on the wall, first you have to know what to do, then you have to know how to do it, but Spanish. But in all seriousness, it talks about the impact. If we just keep it on the screen for a sec, because to give you a chance to read it here. He says, if you look at the number of managers who've worked under him, Arteta, Company, Ten Hag, look across also Europe. Xavi has just demolished the Spanish title race with Barcelona. And then you look like other disciples like De Zerbi and Potter and Brendan Rodgers. Wayne Rooney has talked in the Sunday Times and on the show before about how Guardiola has informed the way they play in the lower divisions as well. That's legacy. That's not money. That's about what one man is able to do with his vision, his philosophies, his theories on football. He also talks about Jonathan Northcroft, Michael Flynn at Newport County, who looked at changing the way his team played after he had a meeting with City in the FA Cup in 2019. And I want to read you the payoff because it's a fabulous payoff. There was a press conference where journalists tried to get Guardiola on a decision that had gone against his City side, and Guardiola didn't bite it, as we say, wouldn't respond and wouldn't criticise the official. But after the sort of exchange, somebody taps the journalist on the shoulder and says, look, Pep wants a word with the outside. He goes outside and Pep says, look, I didn't want to be disrespectful or rude, but it's just that I don't want to criticise officials. And he says, Johan Cruyff told me I had to build a team so good it took officials out of the equation. And Johnny Norcroft says, exactly, he tends to take everything out of the equation. Yeah. Doubters, opponents, and any foolish notions that English football isn't for him. It's a fantastic piece. I wholly recommend that you read that piece in the Sunday Times. Can I do a couple of others?
If you're quick, yes.
Okay, I'll be very quick.
Sorry.
Rob Draper in the Mail on Sunday talks about the charges. It would be remiss of us not to talk about the charges. Look at the subdeck there. I have to take my glasses off to read it, but it just talks about the issue that still is around. A very serious issue. We're making light, but these are very serious issues. As you rightly say, Vicky, City vehemently deny the charges. That will have the day in court. But I think as far as this piece is concerned, Rob, again, very detailed and challenges this idea or this discussion that erupted. The much respected Paul McCarthy was saying in midweek, former sports editor himself, that is football about mud on boots or is it in men in suits? And really it's about what happens on the pitch. But as far as this particular issue is concerned, you cannot escape what is the elephant in the room, and that is those charges. But what Rob says here is that City have established a dominance that we've not seen since Liverpool won 5 titles out of 6 in 1984. That year they went on to win the treble. But what Rob also says is that United's wage bill, annual wage, is not too far away from City's as well, and they've not been able to sustain a title challenge for 10 years. Again, another really good piece, very, very detailed. And just one last one. Andy Dunn, the Sunday Mirror, talks about Arsenal, talks about the fact that, yes, they were absolutely outstanding this season, but they surpassed expectations, but it was always going to end in tears. They've got one of the youngest squads in the Premier League. They simply don't have the depth in terms of quality that City have. They've got a number of players that are able to step into the side, and City do, and look as though they played there for 10 years, whereas Arsenal are still finding their way, and they deserve great credit, not criticism, for the way this title race has panned out.
And I'm sure they will get that. But they've got this horrid stat, though, at the moment, haven't they? 248 days at the top, and yet they failed to go on and win it. It's the longest that anyone's been at the top and not gone on to win it. Jamie Carragher said that he felt they fell apart after the international break. In some respects, have they only got themselves to blame because they did have that 8-point advantage on April the 8th?
I think they will shoulder the fact that they did explode a little bit, and I think it was a variety of factors. I think what got Arsenal that far and what underpinned a lot of their good work was their defensive solidity. Saliba's injury influenced that. Then there was the thing of Arsenal were playing for a long time without pressure and with the expectation really that they're at the top and they're going to stumble. And that was okay when City were also stumbling. Once City started coming at them, the psychological toll of that, of now you're not just focused on yourselves and what you need to do and your game plan, you're now keeping an eye out for what City are doing, how well they're playing. And like I said, when City start coming, and I've seen this movie before, they do not let up. And if you're the team that's competing against them, it's very, very hard to shut out how well they're playing, the score lines, the manner of victory, watching Erling Haaland bully teams, and that then starts feeding into your psyche. Now, having spoken to some people at the club, and I put this question to Mikel Arteta about external noise, because I was told suddenly all the talk about, well, Arsenal are going to wilt under the pressure, it started getting louder and it started piercing through that dressing room more. Because of City's sustained pressure and that getting louder, then it permeates, and because it's a young team that haven't been in that situation before. Listen, leading City when City are not really looking themselves and haven't hit and groove yet is a different proposition altogether than dealing with a City in stride. A City that they've smelt blood and they're coming and they know what they're going to do, they know how they're going to do it, and there's just utter confidence. We saw the way they dismantled Real Madrid as well, with that mentality of, we know we can do this is in us.
It's just a shame. If they were neck and neck, you could almost sort of look at it and think, okay, but the fact that they did have such a huge advantage and they let it slip is the thing that just must get to them the most. That's going to be hard to get right.
I think it's so demoralising, and for weeks now you could feel it. And I think the real sea change was the game at Anfield against Liverpool, because that first half, I was in the ground that day. That first half, you had an Arsenal with panache, with belief, with a surety. And once Liverpool and that Anfield crowd changed, once there was that switch, they started second-guessing themselves. They could not have control anymore. They struggled to assert themselves in that game. And that's a psychological thing, right? And then you wonder, how are they going to recover from that second half? Because like I said, to compete with City, you have to be near perfect. And the issue with competing with City is draws are defeats. And I looked at the body language after that game and I thought, we're going to need to see a reaction. And what happened was you saw that second half carry then forward into all their games until it got to the point where City had caught up with them and the shoulders and everything dropped. You can tell so much from a team's body language and how they're approaching things. And Arsenal didn't have the same assuredness in themselves.
Just very quickly, I think also, just on top of that, if you look at the Arsenal squad and the City team and the management of those two teams, I think they were very different. And that's one of the things that I saw Arteta speaking yesterday, spoke so well about we need to heal. I'm not going to blame anyone. I'm not going to draw on any excuses. We just need to heal and look at what we've got to learn from this season. I think one of the things they'll learn is the management of the squad. Because I say that advisedly, here I am saying management of the squad to a guy who's done a terrific job this season. I'm not going to question that. I'm going to just compare. And I think as far as City are concerned, you look at the games that De Bruyne was rested for. You look at the games where Haaland came off early when all of us expected him to lay waste to the opposition, maybe get a hat-trick. He was taken off with having scored 2 goals or 3, whatever. You look at the rotation of Bernardo Silva. You look at the rotation of so many others.
Just very quickly, that luxury, though.
But compare
other teams
that
don't.
to Bukayo Saka, who has played every game this season, played every game last season. They're young players. They ran out of steam. And if you look at some of the headlines in the papers, that's exactly what they have said.